Joe, we've talked a few times about how fans are usually split between the Star Wars universe and the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, that's come up a few times. Like it's this weird thing that you kind of have to like one and hate the other.
Yeah, it just becomes odd though
Hmm.
when that happens within the same group of fans. And I'm not saying
Hmm.
it happened a ton with Star Trek when they rebooted it in 2009, but it kind of felt that way, didn't it?
And it happened a little, and by little, I mean I definitely remember in the movie theater watching the 2009 J.J. Abrams produced Star Trek, and within the first like what 10 minutes of the movie, Jim Kirk's dad dies, and someone was like, "That's not supposed to happen." That that was wrong. What are you doing? God.
That guy's a phony.
So yeah, like pretty much almost like right away, people were kind of mad at it. And like I can understand why to a fault, but at the same time, I thoroughly enjoyed the JJ movies. Um they were
Yeah.
different for sure. Like the style was more weirdly like 1950s hot rod Star Trek than what
Yeah.
we were used to getting.
Like everything felt like it had fins on it, right?
Yeah, it did. Everything was a Cadillac suddenly.
Yeah. You go
Little
into the bathroom and all of a sudden the toilet's got fins on it. Obviously next to the seashells, of course.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And then oddly everything is seafoam colored. Um
It-
but no, of all
yeah.
the things that like the I think the biggest problem that people typically have with the JJ movies um is that they say that they don't focus on any of like the Star Trek philosophy that's usually put into a series or into a movie, and they focused mostly on just action scenes and becoming more of a modern science fiction as opposed to upholding what Roddenberry had originally wanted for the series.
Which I was actually fine with though,
Yeah.
because you and
Hmm.
I talked about this with the whole Snyder universe here within the
Hmm.
DCEU. The issue that they had with those movies is they came in way too dark,
Yep.
and at this point in time too, we're coming off of the seriousness and like the heavy-handed nature of the Dark Knight trilogy, and specifically the Dark Knight had like just come out the year before, I'm pretty sure.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so like we needed something, I think, like this,
Hmm.
obviously unrelated properties, but when you're kicking off something like this, you need to have, I think, something fun that you can kind of attach to. Obviously you've got this reboot, so all the characters, even though they're the
Hmm.
same names, they're not the same people technically.
No, and what also is great is that another, literally not even kidding, like a moment when watching that first movie when they basically spell out that this is created an alternate universe.
Yes.
The same guy goes, "Oh, oh, okay," and that was it got a good laugh. So,
That
but
guy's not a phony anymore.
no, now it's kind of fine, but I'm still a little mad. Still a little mad. Um, but no, like one thing that this movie did do way more than the original series did, um, is it really did do a lot more character like development and did a lot more character driven parts of the movie where we see much more of Uhura, and we have this fun added thing that she never tells anyone her first name.
Yeah.
And you really see her like as this incredibly strong, incredibly confident woman. Especially, oh my gosh, the scene where they're rushing off to try and save Vulcan in the first movie. And she goes to Spock, like, what the hell am I doing on the Farragut? Like, you yourself said, I have all these things that I am the most capable person in my position, and yet I'm not on the Enterprise. And he's like, well, I don't want to make it seem like there'd be any
Any
favoritism.
favorites?
She's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm on the Enterprise. And he
It would appear
switches
that, yeah.
her.
Yeah. And he goes,
Like,
it would appear that you
appear
are.
so. It would appear you are.
Well, and that's what I thought was
Hmm.
really funny too about that movie was when you have all of these characters together, on the same, ship that basically doesn't get destroyed
Hmm.
by Nero and his crew. Like it to me, it didn't feel like it was all that far fetched for why everybody ended up in the same place.
Yeah, no,
You
not at
know,
all.
Yeah, it didn't quite have that like Guy Ritchie effect where you've
Hmm.
got, 14 different storylines converging on one point.
Yeah.
You just happen to have people who were in the academy together. They
Hmm.
crossed paths a couple of times, and now they're literally depending on each other for survival. And so I thought that was, actually pretty well done. Um, Especially the fact that you kind of find out that James T. Kirk is actually a pretty intelligent individual. And I thought that was one of the most redeeming aspects of the movie was that you see how he's had a troubled childhood because
Hmm.
of the aforementioned, father dying, where he could have
Yes.
probably set
Hmm.
that thing on autopilot, but hey,
Yeah.
whatever.
Hmm.
He had to film Thor, so he had to move on to
He
something.
did.
But
He couldn't be there for too long. You're the god of thunder. You can't sit on the Calvin. Come on.
yeah, but I mean, that's where I thought this didn't deserve some of the hate that it ended up getting from
Hmm.
other fans, because I mean, this is one of those this is one of those rare scenarios where a reboot has a 94% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and for good reason. One of it is the story is compelling. The story is very fun. You don't need a bunch of background to what happened. And Nero kind of gives it all. Like when he says, like, no, my planet was destroyed. You get background information from the Spock from the original series. Like it
Yeah,
does a really good job of setting up its own universe within a very large, expansive universe that is Star Trek. And I think what really, really helps sell that are the actors and actresses that play these characters. And they in no way take anything away from the original crew. And yet they're
no,
able to bring
yeah,
on an absolute life of their own to all the characters. And I love, and then things that just make so much sense. Like you have Kirk and McCoy are buds and getting along well before Spock comes into the whole relationship in the equation. And
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it took probably 4 or 5 episodes for McCoy to even show up in the original series, um,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is a
And this,
shame because I think McCoy's the best part of that triangle. But
I- and I do have to give credit to the writing team,
mhm,
on this one, because J.J. Abrams brought in, his frequent collaborators, as we like to say,
yes,
Roberto
mhm,
Orci and Alex Kurtzman. They don't always have winning combinations. Don't get me wrong, but
no, no,
in this first reboot movie, like they absolutely made sure that you knew enough about every character, especially
mhm,
Bones, like you mentioned.
yeah,
Um, played by oh god, Carl
the
Urban.
incomparable Carl Urban,
God,
yes, Dread
Carl Urban.
himself.
Oh yes, God, he was such a good decision to cast him for this role, because
Hmm.
I mean, that's what I think was really the issue here, was that, we've talked about reboots before and how people have a hard time struggling with, well, this movie doesn't exist without the other one, which is,
Yeah.
pretty obvious argument. But in this case, you've got actors who, I mean, they had this daunting task of giving you familiar, but then
Hmm.
also existing in a universe where nothing should be familiar, right? Other than the names and the ships and,
Yeah.
and but yeah, I mean, I thought that was just the acting alone, and then the quick context we get for everyone. Like, you're not
Hmm.
spending confusion at
No.
any point here getting to know characters.
No, no, no. They do, like, again, like this is another great example of, like, especially like how you don't get how movies like, I don't know, Justice League, since we like to bring them back, like you can, like, this, like you have a massive character ensemble and you get a good amount of story to almost all of them in
Yeah,
one movie where it makes sense. Like, yeah, this makes sense. You've got Kirk, who obviously, like, main character. We already talked about him. We see Spock's storyline of how he is, again, like another character, which Star Trek likes to use a lot, is torn between two worlds, not really fitting in well in either, and makes his way to Earth. And then you get small context for the characters you may not be focusing so much on. You get McCoy, who lost everything in the divorce except for his bones, which
yep,
is another great way how, like, they don't explain, to my knowledge, in the original series, they never explain how that nickname comes around. He's just Bones.
yeah,
So like they
yeah.
do just like a fun little thing, like, oh, that's where it comes from.
It's like
Um,
you meet a dog at the pound, and you just call him Chubs.
yeah.
That's just how it happens.
Mhm.
But yeah, they they do that, and you're dead on with the smaller characters, who may not like get the main screen time, but
Mhm.
like with I just like it with how they gave Sulu some decent screen time. Maybe not so much
Mhm.
background development. They kind of do that in the next ones, but
Yeah.
it's still the fact with him basically being in the seat because somebody else essentially called in sick.
Yep.
and, and and then he can't get the ship to start. I
Is
mean,
the parking brake on?
yeah, yeah. Oh my God, which brings up an even better point, man. Bruce Greenwood, playing Pike. I
Mhm.
just that dude is, I mean, as far as the early 2000s went, if you just needed a strong, like middle-aged character,
Mhm.
like that dude was just in
Hey,
the
you just give him a call.
yeah, he's just on speed dial with like
Mhm.
every agency, trying to work with casting a movie. I mean, because um, as Pike, I just thought he was
Oh, he
the
was.
perfect
Mhm.
guy for that. Yeah, seriously, whoever was the casting director for this movie, which usually I would have in my notes somewhere, um, whoever you are, we
Mhm.
absolutely
We
love your
thank you.
work.
Yes. And another thing that I think was done really, really well is and it's something that Abrams does like doing is his need to have as many things done practically for effects as possible.
Mhm.
Now, of course, one glaring issue with practical effects are definitely the lens flares.
Oh Jesus,
Oh, way too many. And I will admit that sometimes I will get swept up in a property or franchise I love, and I will just not notice that like at all. I remember seeing this movie for the first time and then hearing the criticism about like the lens flares. I'm like, I didn't fucking notice that at all. Like that didn't happen. You guys, it probably happened like once or twice and it was really bad and you're complaining. And you went back and watching, like, oh my God, this is every 5 seconds. It's just lens flares.
dude, it was like your brother trying to annoy you, with like a surface while you're driving on a road trip,
Oh
and
yeah.
just consistently getting the sun to shine right in your eyes. I mean, I only noticed it right away because I think at that point we were watching in IMAX, and so I
Hmm.
was I was like dead center,
Oh,
and we waited 3 hours in line to watch this, by the way.
ooh.
So I'm sitting there dead center watching these flares the entire time in like the most majestic screen ever, and I'm like, it's like, wow, I
Wow.
really wish I hadn't worn my contacts to this because they're going to be fried by the
Oh
time I
yeah.
get out of here.
No, you'll have no retina left after that.
I'm pretty sure I don't. That's why I can't see anything even a foot in front of me anymore. I'm
Ooh.
I'm worse than snow blindness and cats, Joe.
Well, lens flares aside, things they did great with practical effects. Like I loved like the ship. What inside of the Enterprise was gorgeous. The
Yeah.
the super clean look of the bridge. How engineering seems to be an entire deck and not just one room
Yeah.
was brilliant. Like it
Yeah.
looked so cool. And which I believe engineering was a brewery, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. But yeah, they shot all of engineering in a brewery.
So they could
Um,
freeze it in the winter and skate on it and then melt it in the springtime and drink it.
yeah, it was the perfect plan.
Oh man. But that is interesting you bring that up though, because that's pretty consistent across even the TV properties
Hmm.
and the the movies here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did really love how engineering is like this sprawling, almost like a warehouse type of thing,
Yeah.
as it should be, right? I
Yeah, you
mean,
would think that like to
yeah,
power that massive ship, I get it's in the future and all, and things get more compact, but still, that's a lot of oomph that you need to move. Like engineering should be more than just a simple room with with a cylinder in the middle with a big crystal in it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There should still be something else going on there. That's a good
Hmm.
point. I never actually thought of that.
Yeah.
It's a good point you bring up.
Hmm.
Which
But
does bring me to one thing though.
mhm.
As far as people being where they should be, the one thing I will say about this that didn't make any sense to me was how Kirk gets marooned on a planet that just happens
Happens
to
to have
have
Scott.
Montgomery
Yeah.
Scott. Yeah, I mean,
Yep. That was
yeah,
definitely that had to happen for the movie.
yeah, yeah, just
Hmm.
perfectly happened. I mean, for one, that's also the same planet that Spock, gets marooned on once
Hmm.
Nero forces him to watch his own planet get destroyed, and then yeah, chance encounters. I mean that was the one part of it where
Hmm.
I suspended, my disbelief a little bit in the theater
Yep.
when I was watching it the first time because I was just loving it.
Hmm.
Um, but one thing I did want to mention aside from that too, though, was the fact that for once the supplement to the movie actually has a lot of cool things in it. Because there's all the time you see like the book adaptation for a movie, and then there's certain things that they'll release after the fact to fill in things they missed.
Yeah.
This was not one of those movies. They actually had a very excellent fleshed out miniseries that involved the Next Generation crew and developing the ship that Spock ends up time traveling with.
Yeah, there was a lot in that series. I remember having it and I wish I still did, but I lent it to someone and the jack off never gave it back. I won't
Ooh,
mention names because I'm not that low, but do
that's
know
okay.
I hold a grudge for this reason, one
Yep.
among many. But yeah, that was a great series. It involved like you had Picard who was working with the Romulans as an ambassador, and that comes back again in his series that's out now. You had Worf, who's actually back with the Klingon Empire and was dealing with Nero after they had the Borg technology put on the ship and was almost killed. And Data is the captain of the Enterprise E after Picard had stepped down. And
Yeah.
you had, like you said, Geordi the Forge is one of the like was the chief engineer in designing Spock's ship, the Squid. Um,
Yeah.
so that was just cool that they wrapped all this in and had it before the movie came out to get you excited for it. It was a great prequel that led into it. And any gaps that you may have had going into that movie were actually filled by that graphic novel or that comic series.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was brilliantly done too,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, one of the reasons why I love sequels isn't necessarily because it's just another excuse to watch a movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that I really get attached to characters and I like seeing what they do. I just want to keep seeing what they're doing with their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was what I think was the most compelling part of that whole little, mini series before the movie came out was cool. I get to see a little bit more of some of my favorite characters for the next generation. And they're all doing things that you would assume they would be,
Yeah.
like with Worf, it makes sense because the entirety of Next Generation, especially in the early portion of the series, he's like he's refusing to answer the call of the
Mm-hmm.
Klingon, right? Like you see him fighting with it internally. Like he struggles a lot. Like there are times when I remember him and Riker on the holodeck, and like he's showing his teeth, his old nasty mangy,
Mm-hmm.
mangy looking teeth, and then Riker's like, hey, 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 come down, come on down. Yeah, sun's getting real low. Sun's getting real low. And then then all of a sudden Worf's right, he snaps back into place. But it would make sense to me though that after his Starfleet days that he would
Mm-hmm.
maybe just make it back to his own people
Yeah.
and maybe bring that perspective to them. And so that was really cool. And you mentioned the Forge and all that. And I just loved how they, once again, there's a lot of care
Mm-hmm.
put into this and it really showed.
Absolutely. And speaking of like care, like the little things they did for like Easter eggs throughout this movie, I mean, there were a ton. I think one of my favorites was has to do with Montgomery Scott when they first find him and they're
Oh
talking
yeah.
about relativistic physics and like beaming like living organisms from certain distances. And
Yes.
to
The
prove his
dog, the
point,
Admiral's
he
dog.
Admiral Archer's prized beagle, and
Yeah.
he still feels really bad about it because the dog never showed up on the other side of the pad. It was just like,
Yes.
oh, that's great. I mean, we're assuming it's not Porthos from Enterprise because I'd be an incredibly old beagle at that point, but just a fun little thing there. On
It
that same,
leads you to believe that
mhm,
that story could have made sense at least.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's why he was marooned there was great. And in that same scene is when you see a Tribble
Yeah.
hanging out there. Uh, for a Star Wars nod, when Vulcan explodes, R2 is flying through the debris.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you pay
Yeah.
attention close enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a lot of like fun Easter eggs and nods to like the original series and other things throughout that movie were really really great. And of course, like when Leonard Nimoy shows up as Spock, it was just incredible. Like you just loved seeing him as Spock again.
Yeah. I mean that was where like the hairs in the back of the neck kind of stood up.
Hmm.
For me, I think one of the best moments in this movie was actually when Nero and Kirk are fighting on I always forget his ship that has the Borg technology. What is it called again?
Oh, the
Narada?
Narada.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
Narada. When they were fighting and he recognizes him and he says, James T. Kirk was a great man, but that was another life.
Hmm.
Like it kind of comes full circle that Nero has gone from a good person
Mm-hmm.
to experiencing tragedy and then fully descending into madness at that point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like at that point in the movie, you realize, yep, Nero is lost.
Yep.
Like there's
There's no
nothing else to
saving
him.
him. No, no,
Yeah,
no.
like he could admit that James T. Kirk was awesome,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't matter. He has to win.
Yep.
And I thought that was like I mean, it's like the climax of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
but still, that was another one of those moments where I'm like, oh man,
It did.
I,
And shortly after that, we saw another great Star Trek trope when the Narada was getting sucked into the singularity caused by the red matter, which red matter, whatever,
yeah,
science,
yeah.
sure. And the Enterprise then is almost getting sucked in too. And their solution is to eject the warp core, which happens so frequently in Star Trek. So it's like, yeah, they ejected the warp core.
People were clapping when that
Mhm.
happened during during our screening because we had I mean almost every Trekkie in the area was
Mhm.
there, and this was like the Thursday night showing or whatever, so it was, yeah, when that happened people are like clapping and whooping
Yes.
and laughing and everything. I'm
Mhm.
just like, yeah, that's good,
That's
that's good
pretty
stuff.
great. Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man. And then I mean, we could gush about the first movie quite a bit, but looking at the next two movies, Into
Oh,
Darkness I think gets the most flack out of any of this.
well, before you get too far on that,
Mhm.
I did want to mention the casting was responsible by April Webster and Alyssa Weisberg.
Ooh.
So I just wanted to put those names out there. Once again, April Webster and Alyssa Weisberg were responsible for the casting in that first movie.
And a
So
fine job they did.
damn fine job.
Damn fine job. Um, but going on to the next movie, this is the one where I think the series is at a low point, but even then, like I don't think it's a bad movie. Like I enjoyed Into Darkness still, but I could see where people were mad because it's more or less like a literal weird reboot of The Wrath of Khan. Um, so I could see why
Yeah.
that one being like probably um felt like if you do anything, you should hands off The Wrath of Khan. That's kind of the most heralded like favorite Star Trek movie out of anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So them trying to do that again, and granted, I like the way they did it. You have much more of a rivalry between Khan and Spock than you do Khan and Kirk. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. That
mhm.
that was important too, because you know, Spock is essentially super powered, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's one of the lesser advertised strongest characters
Mhm.
physically in that show or in that movie. But really what I think this movie suffered from the most was phase one MCU syndrome, which
Yep.
was, we're just going to have someone with the same abilities but bigger,
Mhm.
and that's all they did. Like
Yep.
it's, I mean, Khan and Spock, like, yeah, they're both strong, but Khan is supposedly a little bit stronger. So
Yeah, it's Iron Man and
Ironmonger, yeah.
Ironmonger, yeah. So
Well,
it's like
and yeah, and then
mhm.
you've got that half-assed, like, we've seen this spy movie before bullshit
Yeah.
where someone's sent off on a mission that they don't fully understand, but they're just
Mhm.
following orders. And then suddenly, oh my God, leadership just, oh, they just set me down
Mhm.
the wrong path. And they were, they were making me do something naughty the whole time. And you're like, ah, come on, guys.
Tired. But um, like I said, like you said, you mentioned, you get more of Hikaru Sulu in this, which is really good, especially when he actually takes control of the Enterprise for a bit, and he has that little the message out for the Klingons. Was a damn fine moment. Um,
Yeah.
with which was basically a very what he says is more or less a classier version of "fuck around and find out" sort of
Yes.
thing, as the Enterprise is sitting on the border of the neutral zone. And it
Yep.
was so good. And John Cho just did an awesome job as Sulu in these movies.
Whoever
Um,
would have thought that Harold from Harold and Kumar would
mhm.
be that legit? I mean, because I remember that was one of the first issues that people had with this movie when they heard that
Yep.
John Cho was going to be Sulu, and it was the exact same problem that they had with Heath Ledger playing the Joker.
hmm
And then all of a sudden, you see how he does this on screen. You're just like, I have no complaints.
Yeah,
I
not at
mean,
all. And if you're going to complain about any of his previous roles as to why he wouldn't do so well, one, Harold is a pretty straight-laced individual in that movie. Like Harold would actually not be a problem. I'm trying to remember. It was a TV series, and the name is beyond me. But he basically played a chef at a restaurant, and he was also incredibly perverse and awkward.
Oh,
Where one of my favorite things I still use based off of that show is he walks up to a woman, he says hello. Typically they're automatically like immediately disgusted with him, they like slap him or walk away. And in this case the woman just says, oh hi, and says hello, just says hello back to him. And then he kind of locks up and he's like, I'm sorry, I usually don't make it this far. um it's just a fun little thing to do. But that character was much more of a like, this guy's playing Sulu, this would be weird. Like you should have more reservations about that part of John Cho. But again, like, I don't know, don't be mad when an actor has range, I
seriously, that's what
guess.
their whole that's what their
Yeah.
whole career. That's why they got into this. With, well, except for like late term Nick Cage here, but
Yeah.
most actors, that's why they
Hmm.
do it, man. That's why they put all the prep. That's why they're in this career. So
Absolutely. I mean, I have to
yeah,
imagine that most of them would be annoyed if they had to play the same character over and over and over again. You could just get typecast into a role.
yeah. I mean, I think once again we've got not to quote the Goofy movie with a perfect cast here, but we do have a really solid cast, and we haven't even
Hmm.
mentioned Anton Yelchin yet. Playing
Ah.
Chekhov.
Hmm.
Um, and so I do think the second movie, while we're still getting a pretty high level of quality with
Hmm.
everyone involved, especially Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan, which if we go through the phonetics of Khan and
Hmm.
and his name and why he would be a British man, but hey, whatever,
Hey, it's fine.
yeah,
Hmm.
but once again, dude, we've seen this trope before. The whole
Hmm.
let me get arrested so I can destroy the prison from the inside
Yeah.
out. I mean,
Hmm.
it was too close to Dark Knight for that,
Yep.
and so ultimately with RoboCop at the end there trying to kill everybody, um it just wasn't sorry, I mentioned
Yeah.
RoboCop. Sorry, I assume everyone knows who RoboCop is, and I apologize in advance,
Well,
but
I mean, there are worse references you could make out there.
well, I mean, long story short, it was he play is he just called the Admiral, or what's his official title? um I'm trying to remember here.
Hmm.
um all I remember was, once again, we've got this. The only real thing here that's all that looming or dangerous is the fact that he's just got a massive ship that's bigger than the
Yep.
Enterprise, and it's just uh, that's it. That's
Yeah.
that's the only issue, and then they sneak on board the ship and take it out. It's just
Hmm.
like the first movie.
Yeah, it is. It's like you just did the same thing over again. You kind of
Yeah,
recycled the thing, and on top of that, like they say, like, oh, it's a skeleton crew. So like they're literally like 12 dudes on that ship.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
all they could get for this admiral and his massive dreadnought class thing. Which another great Enterprise Easter egg is when you first see that admiral and you see the little ships on his desk, you do see the NX-01 Enterprise as you go up, and then you eventually see his dreadnought ship. He made a model of his own ship um, because
Wow.
reasons. Um,
Well,
Foreshadowing
yeah,
is what that
yeah.
was.
Well,
What's
I
that big
mean,
weird ship there?
I, honestly, I think kind of mentioning what you said about the first one here
Hmm.
being more action and less sci-fi. I
Yep.
mean, that's absolutely what we got with the second
Yeah.
movie. And
Hmm.
and even though I've made fun of some of this here, I mean, I still enjoyed it. I still
Yeah.
thought it was a fun
Hmm.
movie. Um,
That's the thing. Like I know
yeah,
the movie can have flaws and still be enjoyable, and that's what I think Into Darkness is.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and
Hmm.
even with Peter Weller, see, I know I'd remember his name.
Hmm.
Even Peter Weller as a bad guy, I mean, he still sells it well.
Yeah.
So I will say, up until that point, the rest of the film, still felt pretty solid to me. I mean, it
Hmm.
wasn't. Once again, it wasn't the most original, but
No.
still had a lot of fun getting there. So
Hmm. Absolutely. And then you get to the last entry of the series, and I think will be the last entry of that series. I think all of the actors, like their contracts are up. They're not going back. It's done, which is a shame because you do set up the possibility of this crew getting back out there at the end of this movie. But Star Trek Beyond,
yeah,
just a fun movie. Like we've said this before, like it felt like a two-part episode of the original series put into one movie. And it brings around some things that happened in the first movie. And again, like the actors, they just sell everything so well. They sell the story in this movie so well, and the story's not even that bad. It's
Yeah.
almost think of like the cage from the first movie, except the cage actually destroys the ship. And then the fuck do we do now?
Well,
Is the how the movie starts.
and that's exactly why it feels like the original series and even like next generation episodes where
Mm-hmm.
the ground team goes down and shit just goes bad.
Yep.
And I mean it, that's what I kept thinking. And I think what was really important about this too, though, is to maybe hold us accountable for some comments we made before, where
Mm-hmm.
when you change a director,
Yeah.
things don't get better here. But Justin Lin coming in to direct this one, I mean, I fucking knocked it out of the
He
park.
did. Like, yeah. I know typically like when you exchange hands with the director mid-movie, it's gonna be bad. Sometimes
Yeah.
you exchange like hands as a director and what's designed to be a trilogy to tell one story, also really bad. Star
Yeah.
Wars. But in this case, it worked. Like when you went from JJ from the first two movies and then you went to Lin in this movie, like he did a great job. And like I know flack was coming off of because like, oh, he directed the most recent Fast and the Furious movie at that point. What is this guy doing Star Trek? It's going to be more action and nonsense. And yeah, there was action. There was some nonsense, but there was also really good storytelling
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that
I
movie.
I thought that was one of the strongest Star Trek stories to come out of the
Mm-hmm.
cinematic universe, not just the reboot, but just pretty much all time outside of the original Wrath
Yeah.
of Khan, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you have the original crew, the original Starfleet crew that crashes on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
You get literally that bridge between the old series and the new, even though we've rebooted it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm going to say this in a really confusing way, but it almost feels like we're bridging the original crew with the rebooted original crew, because we're seeing old Starfleet and quote unquote new Starfleet, which is the same parallel we have
Mm-hmm.
when the first movie comes out. And so you get to see Idris Elba's team here. He's Krall.
Yep.
Krall, who's actually a Starfleet commander, or yeah, and he just uses this alien technology to essentially survive there. That was a really cool reveal that I'm sorry I didn't say spoiler alert for, but
Mm-hmm.
it was really fun. I
Yeah.
I was really into that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to slowly they figure out the mystery and what's going on behind the scenes here. And so it wasn't just boom action. It was like, holy shit, outside of the explosions, there's
Mm-hmm.
actually other stuff going on here.
Yeah, there's a
And
great story there.
yeah, it's fucking brilliant. Not to mention, dude, oh my god, when we got to the end of this one,
Mm-hmm.
and they show Spock and like his, the things that he left behind for
Mm-hmm.
reboot Spock, and you see the photo of the original crew, like
Oh, it
you
hits
see,
you. Mm-hmm.
oh my god, you see, yeah, because at that point, I don't think Leonard Nimoy had actually passed away yet.
No, he
Uh,
did. He did.
he passed away in real life at that point already.
Yep, because that's why
Okay,
he wasn't, I think he wasn't physically seen in the movie because of that.
yeah, I thought it happened like midway through production or
It may
something,
have been something like that. Yeah.
but it was extremely touching either
Mm-hmm.
way. And I mean, so hard hitting. And so if you were there for the action and you're thinking it's the last movie but with no confirmation, that scene alone is enough for me to like go, you know what, everything's going to be okay.
Yep.
Like if we end it here, if it's
Mm-hmm.
ended there, we're totally fine. There's nothing else to bitch about. Like I mean, I remember talking to my dad about it because some of you will hear, that's how I initially bonded with my dad a little bit over the original series. And I actually introduced him to Star Trek Beyond before he'd even seen the other two. And so he watched that and he went, that felt like the old Trek to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that for me, that was the validation. Like holy shit, someone
Yeah.
who lived through the original series, watched it brand new on
Mm-hmm.
TV, saw that reboot and went, yep, that one's the one for me. I like that one.
Exactly. And I think one of the reasons it did that so well is because this was unlike the first movie, which was, I think, very much character driven, but also like a good deal of plot. Obviously, it's a movie, not a TV series. This one was very plot driven. And it was able to do that because these characters are already so well established that we just got to see the actors really thrive in the characters and just drive the story forward so well. So And that was just another thing that made the original series what it was, is it was a plot driven show. You didn't see too much of the other cast doing stuff. Well, I mean, they did stuff, but he mostly focused on Kirk, McCoy, and Spock saving the day. Um, but yeah, so that's why part of what really felt like this was part of the old show is because, again, it brought back that plot driven Kirk is going to come in and eventually figure things out and save the day. And that's what you get out of this movie. So it just feels a lot like the old Trek when you watch it.
Yeah, it feels a lot like the old Trek, but also has space for new characters like Sophia Boutell's Jayla.
Oh, she was so good.
Yeah,
I think after watching it, J.J. Abrams is like, she's my favorite character in the entire like three movie series. After watching that actress do what she did with that character.
Yeah, and once again, this is the strength of these guys in this trilogy, was that they can give a tremendous amount of background to someone in a very short period of time, and they did that for her. You find out about her family and how she lost them on this planet, and and this fight between her and Krall, and how they've all known each other for a long time, and so yeah, dude, it was so. I mean, obviously, we had a little bit of a blip with Into Darkness, but ultimately, hey, the bread on the outside of the sandwich was really good, really solid, and we didn't even have to, cut the crust off of it. Like, that's how good that bread was. Sorry, I'm on a sandwich kick. I've been eating a lot of sandwiches lately, Joe.
It's like someone, like, we're both hungry. It's okay. It's fine. And I think maybe that's a good place to end this. Is we go and we make a sandwich and we call it a day.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.